Hello and welcome to Datacasts. In my last video, which I will link up to there on the top right of the screen, we created this R script which allows us to read the HTML from a web page, and that web page happened to be any given film review on The Guardian's website. It returned a data set which had information such as the title of the film, the title of the review, the author, the URL, the star rating, and so on. Now that's all well and good, but what if I want to automate that process to get that same information from a whole bunch of reviews from The Guardian's website, and to do so in a way that respects the terms of that site so that I'm not basically spamming the site with requests? In other words, what if I could do something like just typing get_reviews into my console here, hit an enter, and there you go. It just starts reading from the website and starts downloading the reviews. And more than that, as it's downloading each of the reviews, I can click on one of them and open that review in the browser to read it while I wait. That's some pretty cool functionality. So let's build that script together. So let's stop this one from running here first of all. And by the way, you might have noticed that it was running fairly slowly, and that is deliberate. That is because I am politely downloading a page of film reviews from the Guardian website, and we'll talk a bit more about that down the line. I'm going to restart R so that we start from scratch here, and then I'm going to take a little look at the script that I wrote last time. And as I look through this, I start thinking of one word: dry. D-R-Y. Don't repeat yourself. As you are writing R code, if you find that you are repeating yourself, maybe copy and pasting the same kind of code with some slight variations over and over again, then it's time to think about moving some of that into a function so that you're referencing a single function that is being used multiple times. That is exactly what is happening here. If I look at, say, the code I have to get the name of the author, we've got HTML content, piped into HTML element, piped into HTML text. And what happens for the review title? The same thing, HTML content, piped into HTML element, piped into HTML text. And even further down here for the review summary, we've got stand first, but again, piped into HTML element, piped into HTML text. So I think what I can do is refactor this code and abstract out some of the code into a function, and then reference that function rather than repeat myself. So right at the top of my script, after I call my packages, I am going to create my first function. Now it's important that we think carefully about the name that we want to give this function. It should really describe what it is that we're doing here. And what are we doing? Well, if we look at the last step of this code that we have been repeating, the last thing we do is we get some text from the web page. So why don't we call our function getText? Get_text, and then we'll make a function, and inside the curly braces is where we hold the logic for the function. Now if we look again at our code, what are the things that are changing? Well, it's mainly just what is inside HTML element. So in this case it's address A, and then down here we have the div and the h1. So we'll need to pass the content inside HTML element as an argument to the function. And we should also probably pass the very first thing that's being piped in here into the function as well, because mostly that is HTML content, but it might be something else such as stand first. So that's also changing. So our two arguments will be HTML_content, and I'm going to call the second one tags because we're passing a series of HTML tags. Okay, and then we can mostly just repeat our code, but replace the pieces that are going to change with our arguments. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it into here, but inside HTML element, I'm going to pass the tags object instead. HTML content I can leave as is because that is actually the name of our argument passed to this function. Now it's good practice to make sure that we always return something with a function, so I'm going to call this text, and then at the bottom I'm going to return text, and that's pretty much it. But what it means is I can now use this function instead of all of the code. So author I'm just going to get rid of all of that and type get underscore texture and then remove everything after that. So you see how much more readable this is and how much simpler it is. What I'm doing, I'm just getting text within the anchor tag, which is within the address tag. And I can do the same thing for the review title. So I'm going to replace this with get underscore text. I'm going to bring that up here, delete all of that, and then delete everything after that. And because these are such short lines, I can just bring them together like that. I can remove a line as well. And even for the review summary, I can do the same thing. We have stand first instead of HTML content, but it's exactly the same principle. And before we forget, let's add in the first argument, which is HTML underscore content. And then down here, the same HTML underscore content. I can do the same thing for review summary, only with a slight variation for the first argument as well. So I'm going to replace this with get underscore text. And I'm going to just cut stand first, bring that in, delete the pipe up here, and then delete everything after that. So much more readable, so much simpler. Now we haven't really reduced the amount of code that we have. We still have about 60 lines, but that's not really the primary aim. The primary aim here is to make sure that we're not repeating ourselves so that the code is simpler to read, and that if we need to make a change to some kind of functionality, that ideally we do that within one function which is reused multiple times within the code. Let's look to see if there's anything else that we can refactor into functions. If we come down here and we look at the stars that we're grabbing, we're piping stand first into HTML elements and then HTML attribute. And we do that in this version of the stars and in this version of the stars. The only difference, again, is the first argument that we might pass to a function, stand first and HTML content, and then the HTML elements are slightly different. The attribute values are the same, but if we want to make a function that grabs attributes quite versatile, then we should allow for something different there as well. In other words, we are probably going to have 3 arguments that we pass to this particular function. You can probably guess what we're going to call this. So if I come up here, I'm going to call it get underscore attributes, which is a function. And the 3 arguments that I'm going to pass to this are HTML underscore content. And the next one, you know, I might not pass 2 arguments. I could pass all of my tags, whether they go to HTML elements or HTML underscore attr, as a single argument, because that could be a vector. And I'm going to call that tags. And I've got 2 sets of tags. I've got element underscore tags, and that is going to be the first item that is passed to the tags vector, whereas the attribute underscore tags is going to be the second item which is passed to the tags argument. Then we create an object called attributes, and we feed in HTML underscore content. And again, that could be the HTML content object that we created outside of this function, or it could be the stand first object. It doesn't really matter. In any case, that then gets piped into HTML underscore elements, because there might be, we're expecting to grab multiple attributes here. And within that, we can pass our element tags. And then when we call HTML underscore attr, that is when we can pass our attribute tags. And then finally, we return attributes. So now when we come back down to stars, so instead of all of this here, let's just recreate that object. We're going to do stars, get underscore attributes, stand first. Oop, I forgot to add my brackets there. Get attributes, stand first as the first argument. And then the second argument is going to be a vector. And the first item will be everything that we've included here. So that's SVG path. And then the second argument is, or rather the second item passed to this character vector is fill. And now I can just delete all of that. I'm going to save this script. I'm just going to try running this just to make sure that everything still works at this point. So Control Shift and Enter. I did see some red text there, but I think that is just noting, functions that are masked. That's fine. It looks like everything worked. Let's just click on Data with Date. And everything we expect to see is still here. So our code is still working just fine, but we're starting to make things a lot simpler. So let's keep going. So the other stars that we have here, HTML content, HTML elements, HTTR, let's do the same thing. So let's create a stars object here, and we will call get attributes again. We will pass HTML underscore content, and we will pass a character vector, and there's slightly more to pass to the elements piece here. So we will copy all of that. And then the second one, as before, is fill. And now we can just get rid of all of that. Okay, things are starting to look a little bit simpler, but we can definitely go further than this. If we come down here, we can see for the review body, we're actually calling HTML elements plural, and then text, and then paste. Now we're only doing this once, but I want to give the user the option of calling something like this whenever they want to. So they're grabbing multiple elements, or the text from multiple elements, and then that's being concatenated into a single string where each paragraph, and we're assuming that they're going to be grabbing paragraphs, are separated by 2 new lines. So let's pop that into a function as well, and I'm going to call this, perhaps unsurprisingly, get underscore texts plural, and that is a function. And we can use the same arguments as get underscore text, so HTML underscore content and tags. We create a texts object, and then we pass HTML underscore content, pipe that into HTML underscore elements plural, and that accepts our tags, which is piped into HTML underscore text. And finally, that is piped into paste, with collapse being equal to the 2 new lines. So \n/n. And then finally, we need to make sure that we return texts. That means that when we come down to grab the review body here, we can just pass get underscore texts, passing HTML content as the first argument. And the second argument, that will be our tags, which we have right here. So we can just copy and paste that, and we can get rid of everything else. Again, I'm just gonna restart R, and then I'm gonna run the whole thing, and I'm gonna click on the data with date object, and everything is still here. So we haven't broken anything, which is great. So this is all looking good up to this point. But what about the actual creation of the data table? Can I simplify all of this down here? Well, I think I can. I'm going to create another function, and I'm going to call it getDataTable. So let's just scroll up here. Get underscore data underscore table. And that is a function. And what do I need to pass to this? Well, let's think about this. If I scroll down to my original code. So what's happening here? Well, I'm creating these different columns, and then I'm referencing objects that I've created. But why not just skip a step? Instead of creating objects that are passed to column names that are the same as the objects, why not just pass the code straight into the tibble itself? So we don't have to have a lot of what we have up here. We may need some of it, but in many cases we can probably just pass the actual code straight into the tibble function, because so much of our code is so much simpler now. It can all fit onto a single line. Now, if I were to do that, what would I need? Well, when we look at the code we have now, we need HTML content, that's referenced a few times. We're going to need stand first, because we need that for instance, the stars and the review summary. In order to get the review for the URL, we need the URL object. And we probably need stars num as well. So let's list out those arguments. So get underscore data table, HTML underscore content, stand first, URL, and stars. We will create a data underscore table object, which is equal to a tibble. And what's in that tibble? Well, first of all, we'll have our review underscore title. And if we scroll down here, we can just grab the code that we used to do that and just bring that straight into the tibble itself. And then we have the title of the film. So film underscore title. For that, it's a little more complicated, but I still think this works. So we'll grab that code and we'll paste that up here. And I'm going to bring everything onto one line because we're only piping into one thing. It does overrun. You can see this this faint line that runs down my screen, which denotes, I think, 80 characters. It does slightly overrun that, but I think we can get away with it. Okay, and what comes after film title? Well, then we have the author, and that one's pretty simple. That's just right here, our get text. So let's copy and paste that. The review underscore URL is equal to the review object that we created at the start. And the star underscore rating is equal to, I think that's stars underscore num. The review underscore summary, that is going to be equal to, and if we scroll down, that's pretty straightforward. We'll copy and paste that. And then finally, the review underscore body, that is our get texts. So that is this one here. So we're going to copy that and then paste that there. And then finally, we will return data underscore table. And now instead of all of this, we can just call down here where we get the date. We just call we assign that to an object called data, and we will just do get underscore data underscore table, and then we will pass everything that we needed. So HTML underscore content, stand first, URL, and stars underscore num, which means this can all be deleted. The review body, that can be deleted now because we're creating that in the tibble itself. And the review summary, we can get rid of that. And the film title, the review title, the author, this can all go. So when you think that our code actually begins on this line here with the URL, you can see how much less code that we have at this point. So much of it has now been moved up into functions, which is great. And you know what? I can do the same here where I get the date. I think I can do a get date function to simplify this. So after my get data table, I'm going to do get underscore date. And that again is a function. And I only need to pass my data table to this. And then I can just copy all of this. And I can do data, pipe that into the mutate, and we'll assign that to an object, which we can just call data with date, and then return data with date. So now down here, this can be piped into get underscore date. I'm tempted to bring that up onto the same line as well because it's quite a short line. So now we have even less. Now our non-functional code is just this piece here. We're just calling the same sorts of functions over and over again, and those functions are being called within other functions. So most of the work is happening here with get data table, which is calling all the various different functions, which is pretty cool. It makes this code a lot easier to read and a lot easier to maintain. But what if I can also abstract this code into some kind of function as well? What if I can just go all the way and just put everything into functions? I mean, after all, R just consists of functions. And rather than just calling multiple functions, why not just put everything into functions and then call one function? You remember that's what I did at the start of this video, so that is the end state that we're aiming for here. So if we think about what is happening here from the point after we pass a URL onwards, what are we doing? Well, we're getting the review data, so why not create a function called that? I'm going to put this one more towards the top because it's sort of our master function at this point, get underscore review underscore data. And right now there's only one thing we need to pass to that, which is the URL that we're getting the review from. And if we scroll down to the code that we have, well, the first thing we do is we read that URL to get the HTML content. So let's pop that into our function. We also need to get the stand first component, which is right here. So let's copy that and bring that up beneath HTML content. And I probably don't need to do a pipe here. I can probably just pass in HTML underscore content as the first argument to HTML elements. And that just means that it takes up less room and is a bit more readable. And what about the stars? There's quite a lot going on here. Can I simplify this? Well, you remember that we need to do a bit of a check with the stars to see if when we try to get the number of stars, or rather try and get the attributes text for the stars, if that's equal to 0, then we kind of look elsewhere to get it. Well, what if, first of all, we look at stand first SVG? Now, if the stars are not located within the stand first, then there won't be any SVGs. So it's probably better to check at that point up front before we start grabbing any text. So I'm going to come back up to this function I'm creating here, and I'm going to deal with those stars at this point. So I'm going to pass a conditional if underscore else, which comes from the dplyr package. And then I'm going to say length, and I'm going to grab HTML underscore elements. And then I'm going to look for, well, first of all, I'm going to pass in the stand first object. And then I'm going to look for those SVGs. I'm going to say that if that length is equals or equivalence of 0, so if we can't find them, then we're going to get the stars from HTML content, so not within the stand first. And if we scroll down back to where we were before, that is going to be this version that we already have in a conditional. So I'm just going to copy this bit of code here, and then I'm going to paste that up here as my true component of the if else. And then for the false, that's going to be the other version, which is the one with the stand first, which is here. And I'm going to paste that down there. And again, that is going to be stars. But the thing that's annoying me is I then read the length of the stars object depending on whether the attribute is 1, 2, 1, 2, and 2. I think I'd rather deal with this differently as well. I think we can run through the whole cycle of grabbing the attributes and then measuring them as part of a getStars function so that we can just, again, abstract out that logic. So let's scroll back up, and maybe down here at the bottom, I might add another function called get underscore stars. And I'm going to need the HTML content, which might be stand first or might be HTML content. And again, we're going to need to read a bunch of tags because that's all that's going to be different here. If we look at what we've got, we're calling get attributes. We're passing either one object or another. And then we're just passing a vector with 2 items which contain the tags. So even here we should be thinking of that dry principle. We are kind of repeating ourselves, which is why we need this getStars function. So let's come back down. So we'll just create this single object of stars, which is get attributes. And we will pass HTML underscore content. And we will pass tags, and it will just grab whatever the appropriate list of stars are, depending on what we pass to this. And then if we want to measure how many of them there are, then we can create our stars num object. And at this point, we can use what we originally had down here, paste that, and then we can return stars_num. Okay, let's come back up to get review data. And instead of doing get attributes with all of this, this now becomes get_stars instead. And this also becomes get_stars. So yeah, I suppose we still have a kind of a repetition here, but at least we're also dealing with the measuring the number of stars as part of the same function. And it just reads a lot better. What are we doing here? We're getting the stars. So that kind of makes sense to me. And if we come back down to original code, what do we do then? Well, then we get the data table. So I'm just going to copy everything that we had down here, and I'm going to bring that up into the function. And then I'm going to return that. I'm going to return data. And now if I come back, I can delete all of this, all the way up to here. All of that can go because our original getReviewData function handles all of this for us. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to restart R. I am going to run this entire file to load up all those different functions. And then down here in the console, I'm going to pass getReviewData. And we've loaded up this URL object that we can pass. And we have an error, stars_num not found. And the reason for this is because in our get data table, you can see that star_rating was equal to stars_num, but that object doesn't exist anymore because up here in getReviewData, we've called the object stars. So stars_num, actually here is where the error is happening because we're passing a stars_num object, but that doesn't exist within the context of the getReviewData function. It's just called stars. So we'll just rename that to stars. And then the getData table, that has the stars object, which means that star_rating, is also going to be equal to stars. So just a bit of renaming, rerun the file, and then just hit up a couple of times until we get review data. And there we go. You see down here in the console, we just get everything as we did before, but we're just calling a single function now. So we've done a fair bit of refactoring here. We've ended up actually with slightly more lines than we had before. We've gone from about 60 to 80, but that's not really the point. I used to obsess about this, about having fewer and fewer lines of code, but that doesn't really matter. What we have done is we've converted all of our logic into a series of different functions. If I click on the top right here, this sort of paragraph icon, I can also see them listed out. We've got our get review data, get text, get texts, get attributes, get data table, get date, get stars. And so to initiate the whole sequence of events, all I need to do is run get review data and pass a single URL, and it just handles the rest for me. But we still haven't quite reached that point that we were at the beginning of this video, where I was able to run one function, which was get reviews, and I didn't need to pass anything to that function, and it started returning a whole bunch of different Guardian film reviews and was giving me some really helpful messages in the console as well. So in the next video, I will get us to that point where we can run one function and just start automatically grabbing film reviews whilst also providing feedback to the user of that function. And we'll do so in a way that respects the terms of the Guardian's website, so that we're not trying to do things in a way that basically looks like we're attempting a denial of service attack. So join me in the next video and I'll show you how we get to that point. Bye for now.